Stalker is a franchise that I have had a great love and fascination for ever since the series started in 2007, and I've sunk hundreds, if not thousands, of hours into it, through the original series and even more through mods. If you somehow haven't played it, you've probably experienced the countless memes related to Stalker, but for the totally uninitiated, here's a quick primer. Stalker is based in the Ukraine in the mid-2000s, where a second disaster at the doomed city of Chernobyl created the exclusion zone. Imagine forces as dangerous and mysterious as radiation, something you can't see, smell, or taste, which can kill you in horrific and unstoppable ways. But these forces are new, exotic, alien, and pumped to 11. Despite the government's attempt to contain the zone, groups of scavengers, trespassers, adventurers, loners, killers, explorers, and robbers began to infiltrate the zone because, along with the new threats and horrors the zone has within its boundaries, there also lie treasures of unfathomable value. Stalker, in its original 2007 release, was weird, lopsided, poorly translated, buggy, just a little bit ugly, in some areas totally busted, and at the same time, also deeply magical. The years of modifications, additions, fixes, and full game conversions done by the community have only improved the core experience, and added a considerable amount more. The mods that have stayed true to the original intention of Stalker have been the most successful, mostly because they're giving us what we've wanted for a good long while. More Stalker. As I and many others have found, Stalker created a flawed but excellent mold. It is simultaneously like nothing else on the market and also preceded many trends that we see more commonly today. It was one of the first games to join shooter, horror, and role-playing elements with a totally open world environment and AI characters, friend and foe, who acted autonomously and automatically within the space of the game. Despite all the supposed advancements in gaming since the mid-2000s, we don't see too many modern games that let players kinda do what they want in a sandbox, let the pieces fall where they may. In the original games, and especially in the mods, you can basically just lay waste to entire factions, totally crippling story progress going forward, and the game won't even give you a helpful hint that it had done so. Just another save game bricked in a Stalker title. Nothing to get excited about, everybody, it's a normal thing. My main goal today is to examine exactly why a game with so many flaws, so many upfront glaring issues, has managed to stick with me for more than a decade. One of the first things people say when they try to explain Stalker is to say that it has excellent atmosphere, but this is rarely more than the easiest way to explain exactly what Stalker is doing. Almost a back-of-the-box quote, "Great atmosphere," which as a single statement doesn't tell us very much, but I think there are several discernible things going on which build atmosphere in Stalker, and which has made it the icon of PC gaming that it is today. I think that Stalker proves the same thing that the SCP series does, that technical specificity and attempt at authenticity are the magic bullet for engaging science fiction and science horror, and I think the reason for that is that it very effectively and subtly establishes order and chaos. The genius of this is that Stalker rarely has to script any of this tone setting. It's done by the nature of your surroundings. All of the everyday, human-made items in the Stalker universe have strict form, function, and established parameters. What's more, they are recognizable to us immediately. The weapons and ammunition you find are not only visually identical to their real counterparts, they are also technically identical, delineated into their real-world calibers. One pistol's ammo won't work in a different pistol chambered in a different caliber, and everything has a distinct weight and size. These are all known qualities that don't change. What's more, they don't differ from the qualities of real-world items. There really are both 9x18 and 9x19mm bullets, and they don't work in each other's pistols. There really are respirators and hermetically sealed suits, and they don't stand up to trauma very well. These weapons and scientific equipment are all you have to fight against chaotic forces. The unknown, strange, half-mutated blind dogs, tiny psionic dwarf men, invisible, blood-sucking Cthulhu-looking squid men, and swollen-headed, brain-burning monsters. These mysterious creatures defy categorization to the casual observer, and you had better hope that your PM pistol, weighing approximately 0.73 kilograms, can shoot 8 rounds of 0.06 kilogram 9x18 Makarov bullets at 1,060 feet per second fast enough to kill whatever the hell that is, or else you're gonna need a bigger gun, if guns even kill that thing. The fact that there is so much accurate, detailed, and consistent information about the human world available to you makes the Zone, with its lack of information and consistency, just that much more dangerous. It is a quality that many post-apocalyptic games have, but don't wear on their sleeves. That the world, or some part of the world that was familiar, has shifted to the point where it is almost unrecognizable. This makes Stalker, despite not being a true post-apocalyptic world, rather a small bubble of the world which has been warped by apocalyptic energies, take on the characteristics of the genre. The use of specificity in the weapons, ammo, and equipment helps ground Stalker into a particular place and time very effectively, and show how things have changed from the normal without using much dialogue or explaining script. If you've played any of the games, pretend you haven't, and look at the environments and items you're surrounded with. Where do you think you are? And just right off the bat, without Googling any of the plot, probably in an Eastern Bloc country, maybe mid to late 90s, maybe you'll recognize some of the buildings as belonging to the town of Chernobyl, or you won't, and you'll still have a pretty good idea based on the spoken Russian, the mix of NATO and Warsaw equipment, and all the guys in hazmat suits on where you might be. The world of Stalker uses latent imagery from the 90s to involuntarily produce familiarity. Newsreels from small war-torn countries in Eastern Europe were as much the daily fare of people like myself growing up in the 1990s as images from the Iraq War are to a younger generation. If you recognize the name Slobodan Milosevic, you might be a 90s kid. However, this normalcy is shattered very quickly by the nature of the Zone, and we are very suddenly out of the realm of the normal. The Zone appears as a lawless land. The consistency that we expect from your average wooded area, a residential park, even war-torn village, are stripped away by anomalous zones where unquenchable fires burn eternally in scorched earth, where gravity is reversed, where material is sucked into the maw of abhorrent vacuums. If cities and civilization represent order, then the Zone is the chaos of nature, driven up to 11 or 12, so chaotic that those who can actually navigate the Zone are considered supernatural. Stalkers live in their small bubbles of order, where the strange groaning of the earth is replaced by small human noises, talking and laughter, folk songs played on guitars at campfires, forlorn melodies over the radio. Venturing out into the Zone is to venture into chaos itself, leaving the shores of humanity to enter the maelstrom. But the journey holds secret rewards that pull you out of your cage of safety, into the unknown. Those treasures that you prize out of the darkness make you stronger, even if some of them have unwanted barbs. And when you reach the safety of the campfire with its fearful tenders, you have escaped the jaws of danger, back to the light. That is the heart of adventure, the classic hero's journey, and Stalker barely had to script it. Through the area design, item design, and some procedurally generated encounters, Stalker creates an atmosphere that is second to few, even among those trying to attempt the very same thing. In this swirling maelstrom, you are merely a lone individual, sometimes a small group, essentially powerless in the maw of the Zone. You cannot conquer or control it. Indeed, the Zone itself was created in part in an attempt to control chaos totally. As a lone human, you can only subvert the Zone, do battle with its creations, avoid its most dangerous anomalies, and maybe get out with something shiny at the end for your trouble. Or not. The sheer titanic power of the Zone is constantly on display. The shifting anomalies, the psi storms, the generator emissions, the brain scorchers, the goddamn ghosts and monsters, all of these put you in your place. You are not Cortez on the edge of the New World. You're probably more a Juan Ponce de Leon, at best a Robert Scott. If you get out of the next dog pack or bloodsucker attack, it'll be a win. You really just want to make yourself as small as possible. The successful Stalker is not a Hercules grabbing the zone by the throat and shaking all the rubles out. He is the industrious mouse who can make it out of the trap with a mouthful of cheese. As you begin to amass equipment and the mysterious artifacts which grant you boons like greater toughness, health regeneration, speed, and dexterity, you will begin to surpass some of the threats which previously held you back. There will always be more, however. Just as you are able to conquer blind dog packs, there will be pseudo-dogs. And after that, bloodsuckers. And after that, pseudo-giants and controllers. And entire factions of brainwashed assault rifle-toting zombie men. This is probably why S.T.A.L.K.E.R is most often classified as a horror game. Very rarely are you equal to the threats you are meant to topple. You are almost always the underweight fighter in the ring, and the zone is never afraid to turn a boxing match into a battle royale cage fight featuring Andre the Giant, The Undertaker, and Macho Man Randy Savage against you, the Brooklyn Brawler. You do eventually reach a point where you can curb stomp most stuff in Chernobyl, and that's near the scripted end of each game, and it's a minority of the game time. Even when you are super powered with an exoskeleton and a Gauss rifle and a belt full of shiny science magic, you still have to dodge the anomalies and watch your back from sneak attacks from industrious stalkers and mutants. You never reach a point where you have totally conquered the zone. Despite what you might think based on some of the canonic endings, the zone is never cowed. You do not change the zone changes you. And near the end of the game, you are not the conqueror from the outside, you have simply been altered into another inhabitant, the fiercest mutant in the exclusion zone. A fierce mutant with a distinct weight limit. In fact, the biggest retarding factor to your advancement through missions and power is your limited carry weight. You might be able to blow away entire squads of elite military units, but good luck being able to carry back all their valuable equipment, which is the only thing making the supplies used to kill them worth it. It does seem to be a staple of Stalker games that around 5% of the game is combat, 10% is exploration, and 85% of it is running crap from one place to another place, fighting this fatigue system that stops you from running full tilt the whole time with a loaded pack. Having vehicles with inventory space attached, like Lost Alpha implements, is a step in the right direction towards solving this. Every new vehicle you get isn't necessarily worth the extra armor or speed, almost more the expanded inventory space. But most mods and the original games don't have this, so you will likely spend hours hoofing stuff from one side of this fabulously rendered 30-kilometer map to the other for a couple of thousand rubles. I'm gonna argue that this is a good thing, and here's why. Inventory represents, in most RPGs, your strategic mechanism. What you take with you will dictate what you can and cannot do, and giving players a limited inventory space puts practical limits on these options. You can either take an assault rifle and a shotgun with requisite ammo, or a rocket launcher, not both, and you'll need to take into account extra space needed for getting all the goodies you expect to bring back from your expedition back with you from your expedition. You'll want to make the most of every kilogram, so weight-saving mods to your guns, lighter ammo, and taking appropriate firepower are now tactical goals, and getting upgrades to let you carry more weight or run further or faster are as good or better than finding a better gun in the zone. Actually, definitely better. Any artifacts that raise my stamina recharge rate are as good as gold to me because of the quality of life change they represent. Again, this puts into contrast what the game is trying to do, put practical and real-life restraints on player tactics, with what the game does in order to do that, forcing people to constantly stagger everywhere under the crushing weight of their loot-loaded backpacks for several hours. I am well aware of the weakness of this method. Running around for long periods of time instead of blowing things up might turn some casual players off, but I think we've established that Stalker is not for the faint-hearted anyways, and, vehicles. Plus, this gives you a familiarity of locations that you might otherwise not have. After the 10th trip down the same highway, You remember where the anomalies are, you know what the safest path is, and even though the trip might be somewhat mundane, you feel more like the superhuman guide to the zone that you are slowly becoming. In addition, having a large percentage of the game being taken up by mundane tasks, like walking long distances, also provides contrast between the unremarkable and the exciting. A lot of video games choose to make the entire playtime excitement and explosions, and this is perfectly valid. People don't always want to spend their off time doing mundane tasks, they want to blow stuff up. In my more advancing age, I've blown up a lot of stuff in video games, and I find that having a mix of mundanity and action makes the action more potent. It provides pacing without having to script it. Plus, when you're hauling your 9 AKs back to your stash to strip and sell them, you're not just walking, you're racking your memory for known anomalies on your route, you're scanning the horizon for threats. The zone is never quite mundane, even if your task is just to move from one end of it to the other. You can also avoid long trips by just not looting after combat, only taking the most valuable items, even goblin slayering your guns without a favorite shooter. But this is never how I play. I'm a notorious pack rat in every game I've played, and Stalker rewards this behavior by requiring stashes of medkits and bullets and even little piles of screws when you least expect it. And this makes for my playtimes being caught up in long trips to and from the site of my last battle. I think that aside from the bugs common with any Stalker release, mod, or full conversion, the long walk times are probably the weakest part of Stalker. And even those have a purpose, so obviously 100% perfect game, absolutely nothing wrong. I mentioned when I began that Stalker had a somewhat rocky start. The game was in something of a development hell during its last 2 years of production, and a lot of that showed through the disjointed writing, unavoidable bugginess, and somewhat lackluster shooting mechanics of the original release. A lot of features were cut last minute, much to the dismay of many people who were treated to a leaked copy of an unedited earlier version. Stalker fans outside the original dev team saw a vision for Stalker that wasn't quite represented by the release of the original trilogy. Thus, the Stalker modding community grew, eventually becoming one of the most dedicated on the internet. Now, why, you may ask, am I talking about Stalker mods in a video about the overall atmosphere of the game? Well, what Stalker started out as became a blueprint for something bigger, and as someone who still plays Stalker, I can say that the mods are an integral part of what Stalker is today. I don't think you get the entire experience just playing the original trilogy, and I think the community making these mods has maintained Stalker through the years, keeping it from just being an interesting footnote in shooter history. Here you have a community who over the course of a decade plus has iterated and refined the original ingredients of the franchise and created a gumbo that quite naturally distilled what was essential to Stalker and added the parts that were missing. I just don't think you get the full Stalker experience without trying the mods, and I think what the mods choose to focus on is in fact what the heart of the game is, what it does uniquely that no other game succeeds at. If you want my recommendation on what Stalker mod to try out first, I don't blame you for wanting some guidance on the mildly obtuse landscape you might face on first navigating to something like the Stalker mod DB page. Lost Alpha might be a better choice for newcomers, because if you've never played Stalker before, you might have questions like, what's a Brain Scorcher? What's a S.T.A.L.K.E.R? What's a Monolith? Lost Alpha also corrals all the new systems, features, factions, and weapons from Stalker's canonical sequels, Clear Sky and Call of Pripyat. These features were genuine improvements to the game, so now you can play through the story of the original with these features. They also added a lot of the content which was cut before Stalker's release, areas, monsters, and weapons. Lost Alpha also attempts to retell the story of Stalker in a somewhat more coherent way than the original managed to, although this retelling is in the form of weird, lopsided in-game cutscenes that frequently bug out and leave you unable to move or progress if the scene doesn't start or end correctly. But again, game-breaking bugs are what Stalker is all about. Most divisively, Lost Alpha adds vehicles. The vehicles are more useful for their cargo capacity than anything else. They solve that hoofing AKs issue quite handily, and because your whole stash might be in there, you have to treat your vehicle very softly. A lot of Lost Alpha's travel time is shorter because you can drive, but you're almost escorting your car more than driving it. Anomalies you might be able to dodge on foot will become impossible to navigate with a vehicle. It creates a travel dynamic that's different enough from all other Stalker variations that I lean towards calling it divisive. I can see both sides of the argument, but when I think Stalker, I don't think Lada. Having a mechanical partner feels more like a cheat than anything else. If you're not new and you're already familiar with the storyline and setting of Stalker, then I would steer you towards Anomaly. There were a series of mods that were trying to stiffen up the challenge of Stalker, starting with Misery, then Dead Air. Anomaly is the most recent iteration on this concept, and I would recommend it over its predecessors. The most recent build of Anomaly is pretty polished, and it hits a huge number of sweet spots. It's relatively bug-free, it has 3+ new storylines which are connected to the original Stalker story, it has a native crafting and repair system with surprisingly detailed modeling of replaceable internal parts, the faction relations systems are still present, but toned down from the craziness that Dead Air pulls. It has a bunch of new equipment and artifacts, and it has a companion system that works pretty darn well. To top this off, it has a crap ton of new game modes, from replacing everyone with zombies, to various Iron Man modes with save game timers and respawn limiters that put an actual, in real life time barrier between respawns, to Azazel mode, where when you die, you spawn in the body of the next closest Stalker, to Warfare mode, where all of the zone is up for grabs by the various factions. A whole lot of this stuff that I just haven't even scratched the surface of. I mostly just play vanilla Anomaly. The new mechanics are an improvement on what Stalker already offered. Most of the equipment in Anomaly, which you find on corpses, is worn to a nub, despite the illusion that the guy you just killed was shooting at you with an apparently jam-free and pristine firearm. That strangely convenient rustiness, combined with the repair system, means you won't just be grabbing everything on every Stalker you murder. The cost of repairing every gun you find practically zeroes your wallet every time, so you have to be selective. And if the guy you just killed has a shooter you really like, well, you might have to spend some time getting pristine spare parts to bring it back to factory spec, or spend a lot of money on letting one of the mechanics do that for you. This also drives you towards missions, artifact hunting, mutant hunting, and stash discovery as your primary income streams, which fits more with the narrative of the game and is a little more diverse than just looting corpses to get rich. This mechanical balance is what I've been most impressed by in Anomaly. It does almost everything else, both new systems or revamped older ones, quite well. My only two critiques are, firstly, of the companions. As of version 1.3, they can be less than helpful sometimes. Their collision will gang block you into buildings, push you into anomaly fields and out of cover in gunfights, and they run off after every little mutant they see in the bush and get themselves killed quickly and repeatedly. You can change their behavior fairly easily to keep some of these things from happening with this handy-dandy command wheel they added sometime in 0.14, but it's just better, more accessible babysitting. The companions are so flawed because the AI in Stalker is so flawed, generally speaking. When the only AI you have to encounter is trying to kill you or just milling around, it's fine. But when one of them is on your team, the shortcomings of Stalker's decade-plus-old AI become blazingly obvious. Overall, the companions are helpful. They can carry your loot, which solves to a certain degree the AK hoofing problem, assuming they don't get lost or killed. They also help out in firefights just a little bit more than they hinder, and they can spot and track mutants very effectively through foliage, and usually at a greater distance than you can, making those random bloodsucker attacks out in the woods or an abandoned laboratory just a little less spooky. From an atmospheric perspective, it's also pretty cool to gather a group of dudes to go tramping out in the woods looking for tree crystals or whatever, just like you see groups of AI doing in the base game and in the cutscenes. The second feature I can't say I totally like is the fast travel. Likely another workaround for the long loot marches that Stalker makes you do. I never really liked fast travel in any games it's in. I feel like it's a crutch that once you use, you rely on, to the exclusion of enjoying whatever atmosphere the game has to offer. I get why it exists. It's convenient. It saves time in an already somewhat ponderous game, and people like it. But especially in a game like Stalker, I just don't think a fast travel system fits. Like I said before, the loot marches actually serve two functions. They are monotonous, which provides contrast for the big boomy action, and mechanically, they provide you with an incentive to loot wisely, lest your trip to a trader become longer than the Snyder Cut. The loot marches also give you more time in the zone, and to get to know the places that you travel often, making you feel more like a guide than a tourist. In short, I think that the loot marches provided pacing, and to give you a fast travel option removes that pacing. I also think that especially in a game like Stalker, a somewhat niche title despite its influence, in a mod that is specifically trying to make the world more hazardous, gritty, and dark, why would you put in a feature that is mostly wanted by mainstream normies, that makes the game easier? I came here to waste my time in a grim, dark, slav-jank video game. And I'll be damned if that experience is going to be modernized or streamlined in any way. Cool thing with Anomaly is that if you don't like a particular feature, everything is compartmentalized and optionable. Don't like fast travel? Get rid of it. Don't like certain UI elements? Get rid of them. Don't like how the save system functions? You got options. Or hey, maybe no saves at all. Maybe you're crazy like that. Don't like that Sidorovich always stiffs you? Well, now you can force him to pay a better market value. It's really nuts how customizable everything is, and that might be a little intimidating to people who are just jumping into Stalker, but as a veteran, I know exactly how I want to play the game. I don't have to search for a bunch of individual mods to enable and put into a load list. I think Anomaly is the best way to go. It's really good looking, it plays great, it's super customizable, and it's probably the best version of Stalker out at the moment. At least until Stalker 2 is released. There have perennially been rumors of a Stalker sequel on the horizon, rumors which typically didn't result in anything resembling a game. And that's for a variety of reasons, most of them being GSC dissolving in 2012. Despite rumors circulating for years about possible development, sale of the license to various interested groups, and the random leaked screenshot or pre-development sketch, nothing actually materialized until just recently. Well, recently, as of a year ago. We have more than a splash page and in-engine screenshots, we have trailers for Stalker 2, Heart of the Zone. Overall, that's good news to me, but we'll see if it pans out. OG Stalker seemed like lightning in a bottle. A lot of games have come and gone that have tried to spiritually mimic Stalker, and none but maybe Tarkov managed to do it. You have to remember, Stalker was never as polished as it is now, mostly because of an increasingly invested community seeing possibility in what started as a rather unfinished, strange little game. A Stalker 2 would have a high hill to climb, much higher than if it had been released maybe a couple years after the originals. Not only do they have to do better than, say, Call of Pripyat mechanically, which probably isn't that hard, but they also have to beat the decades of mod makers refining and retooling all of Stalker's core mechanics and presentation. Just from a man-hours perspective, that's a challenge, even or especially from a studio that looks like they're trying to produce a AAA product in Stalker 2. Despite how optimistic I theoretically am for more Stalker, I don't want to get my hopes up. I think Stalker fans, including myself, have become used to a product so rarefied that anything off a very particular interpretation of the world and its rules will be disappointing to a majority of hardcore Stalkers. It's the way a lot of reboots go. The company in charge wants to make a successful product, and the original material does not lend itself to mainstream appeal. On the other hand, the mainstream has shifted. Games like Metro have solidified the premise and style, and games like Tarkov have solidified hardcore, high-risk gameplay, like Dark Souls and PUBG before it. My impression of the newest trailers is that of a Stalker-themed Metro 2033 game. I know, they're trailers, not representative of final product. That being said, this Stalker experience seems more streamlined and more canned. I don't like this. Of the myriad of choices, two ways of engaging with a game world story seem to be most common. One is like a stage play. Big production. Items of interest are front and center. Dialogue timing and music and camera angle, and the orchestra swells as you turn the corner to reveal the thing. Oh my god, what a cool thing there. I'm so impressed. Maybe we get to go along and do some gamer stuff after the cutscene, but the story is all presented this way, and it's a dramatic demonstration, and the developers make sure you see the things they want you to see. We could call this method the presentational method. The other way of doing this is to have the game world just exist. not to hold your hand through it, but to let your curiosity naturally drift you into seeing what they want you to see. The world-building elements are all right there. A diary on a work desk, subtle uniform changes between different characters and factions having different equipment that suits their particular style, but there's no, say, camera movement towards an item of interest, or an NPC holding it right in front of your face, or lockdown sequence so you hold the object in front of your eyes to see all the cool polygons. You might miss some things, but everything you see is your own discovery, dug out of the game's world. We could call this style a passive method, and if you cannot tell from my 20-minute long video here, Stalker 1, the 3 games plus mods, were of this passive method. That might not have been the plan. It could originally have been because of budget or time constraints. Stalker did have some cutscenes and some voiceovers for quest dialogue, but cutscenes are expensive, and their development goals were rapidly changing through Stalker's last year or so of development. These presentational methods were few and far between for Stalker 1. However it came about, having the world tell you about itself through sound and text and set dressing created an iconic and atmospheric world that has, in my opinion, not been replicated since. Stalker 2 seems, at least from the trailers, to be of the presentational model. Maybe this is a minority of storytelling moments which would look good in a trailer, but these moments all look like you're pinned down in one spot or locked on a track while characters and actions happen around you. This is not what I want from Stalker. It seems like the total opposite of what made the first series great. I'm not interested in these canned moments. I can get those from a Metro game. I want Stalker. I want granular, deep systems that tell the story through game mechanics. And I don't see any of that here. I mean, look at the inventory screen. Work in progress, sure, but we're only a couple months from release, and I just finished explaining how much of my game time in Stalker was in the inventory screen, like 80%. It's kind of important, guys, and I don't even see a paper doll or anything. If where their work and pride was going was these mechanical elements that I consider so important from the first games, I would think those would be the very first things they show off. But what they are showing off is a very different model of game design. And it shows me that their focus is on canned cutscenes, a lot of ooh-ah moments with big set pieces like Metro or Call of Duty, but not like Stalker. Hey, prove me wrong, but like I said, you're climbing a big mountain here with Stalker 2, and I don't see it's going in the right direction. The possible future of the canonical franchise aside, if you've never played Stalker or only played the core games, I would give the series and its many mods a serious go-through. Stalker has atmosphere. It is one of the few games that was able to do it through mechanics and set-piece design, and it is an excellent example of early RPG shooters. It's a style of game that seems to simultaneously be a vanishing breed and the cutting edge of where the industry is going. At the very least, it's a moment cut out of time, like Chernobyl itself, caught in the mid-2000s forever. And I think that alone is worth taking another trip to the zone to remind you of its hidden treasures.